tonight. My job is simultaneously very easy and yet near impossible. For those of you who know the rabbi, or who have read his books, listened to his tapes, attended his lectures, or otherwise been touched by his work, my job is very easy indeed, because for you, he truly needs no introduction at all. For those of you who have not yet had the pleasure of learning from the rabbi, my job is near impossible, because no introduction could do justice to this unique individual. But I must try nevertheless. And so I have decided to introduce him to you in the three ways that I know him. The three sides of Rabbi Kelemen that I know are Rabbi Kelemen, the great thinker, Rabbi Kelemen, the great teacher, and Rabbi Kelemen, the great role model. Rabbi Kelemen, as a thinker, has undertaken the enormous challenge of mastering the timeless and the infinite wisdom of our Torah and casting it through a conceptual prism so that it can be understood by the minds of our generation. In every era, since approximately the 9th century, there have been exceptional thinkers who have arisen to this challenge. In our generation, with the high level of education of American Jewry and the advancement of mass information technology, the need for great thinkers has been significantly amplified, and Rabbi Kelemen has been one of the leading minds in this area, publishing influential books such as Permission to Believe, Permission to Receive, and To Kindle the Soul. Rabbi Kelemen's greatness as a teacher began with his success as a student. After earning an undergraduate degree at UCLA, and thereafter pursuing graduate studies at Harvard University, Rabbi Kelemen went on to complete 12 years of postgraduate Torah study and field research in the Middle East. In the process, he was privileged to be one of the main disciples of the great Rabbi Shlomo Goldman, one of the great Torah giants of the previous generation, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory. Rabbi Kelemen then took the Mesorah, the tradition of Torah knowledge and wisdom that he received from Rabbi Goldman, and based upon that Mesorah, has educated thousands upon thousands of Jewish men and women, in particular at the Neve Yerushalayim College of Jewish Studies for Women in Jerusalem, where he is currently professor of education. And finally, perhaps most importantly, Rabbi Kelemen, the great role model. All of us have faults, and all of us in some ways try to improve upon them, but very few of us has made it his or her life's enterprise to perfect our character and serve as an inspiration for others to do the same. Rabbi Kelemen is one of those very few. He is amongst those of whom it can be said that he does not teach a principle that he has not internalized himself, and never preaches a lesson that he does not know with veritable certainty that he can put into practice successfully. Such self-mastery and dedication to the pursuit of truth simply made it inevitable, as has happened, that so many would be touched by his example and would reach out to him for Torah, guidance, inspiration, and strength. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen of the Persian Jewish community and all other communities who are here with us tonight, let us all rise from our seats as a gesture of our respect to welcome the thinker, the teacher, and the great role model, Harav Lawrence Kelemen.
Jubin, I have to say that's probably the most dramatic introduction I've ever received, and if you're available for a eulogy, I want to put in a reservation. Good evening. Very special privilege to be here tonight. I want to say a special thanks to Nessa and to Yachad for coming together and creating this amazing evening, and a very special thanks to you, because if it weren't for you, then we wouldn't be having this event. So thank you very much for coming together to learn with me tonight. I'm going to make a promise. My promise is that within a very short period of time, I will give you a tremendous gift. And it'll be a gift that you'll be able to take and do something with. You'll walk out with a souvenir tonight. And it'll be something that you'll appreciate tremendously, and it'll be something that you'll keep for a lifetime, I believe. We should be able to deliver it within about 45 minutes. Sorry, just a minute. So I turned it off. It's my wife, just a minute. Yeah. What do you mean the Amex doesn't work? There's no limit on the Amex. So use a MasterCard. I'm sorry. What do you mean the MasterCard doesn't work? You tried all the credit cards? I don't know. I'll call the bank. Okay. I'm in the middle of giving a speech. Okay. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Sorry. Okay, fine. Excuse me. Yes? Yes, this is Lawrence Kelemen. Yes, I have an account at Bank of America. Your Bank of America? My accounts are what? You froze my accounts? Why'd you freeze? You put a lien on my house? But the safe deposit box? With my wife's jewelry? She's going to kill me. It wasn't you. It was the government. Around 9 o'clock tomorrow. I'll be available. I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you. This is sort of embarrassing. Sorry. Okay. So as I was saying, tonight I'm going to be able to get. I'm going to turn it off. I'm sorry. Just a minute. Okay. This is Kelemen, but I'm in a rush. Okay. Oh, Frank. I know you're my lawyer. What's up? A court case? They trace my phone. They're coming here now? Tell them I'm in the middle of giving a talk. I don't care if they're federal prosecutors. Tell them I'm in the middle of giving a talk. But all right, I'll speak quick. Thanks. Bye. Okay, we have to make this a little quicker than I thought tonight. They say that I've got a court case coming up in 2 weeks, and they're coming to take me tonight, and they already took my wife's jewelry, and they froze my bank accounts, and none of my credit cards work, and I don't even know what I'm being charged with. But my attorney just told me that tomorrow when they pick me up, if I just not only confess, but I tell them that I'm actually in the middle of fixing up the problem, they'll let the whole court case go. I just don't know exactly what I did. He said, if it's only a couple of things, and I just tell them I'm fixing it, they'll walk. They'll just drop the whole thing. Wouldn't it be nice if in 2 weeks, when our court case comes, we knew there's a lot of little things, but there's only really two that they care about. And if I could just fix up those two things, or even if I couldn't fix it up, but if I just start fixing it up, when Rosh Hashanah comes, there'll be a great judgment. He owns the bank. He can give me health. He can give me wealth. He can give me time. He can give me peace. He can give me anything. He owns the bank. Wouldn't it be spectacular if I knew exactly what to do in the next couple weeks? So there's a way to find out. You have someone on the inside. Someone can tell you exactly what's going on. Hi, it's me. I'm going to do it right now. There's a passage in the Rambam, in Maimonides. And the passage says as follows. When God makes the judgment on Rosh Hashanah, He doesn't make it based on the number of admirable deeds I've done versus the number of mistakes I've made. When God makes the judgments, he bases it on how serious those mistakes are versus how amazing those admirable deeds have been. It's a qualitative judgment, not a quantitative judgment. Which means what I've got to do is I've got to pick out those one or two things that are really heavy, that are going to outweigh everything else, and put all my energy in over there. What are those one or two things? Question number one, what should I be focusing on? Question number two. There's a very famous passage in the Babylonian Talmud. In tractate Rosh Hashanah, on page 18a, the Talmud, the Gemara says the following. On Rosh Hashanah, every single citizen of planet Earth, Kol Ba'olam, everybody who lives on this planet, goes before God in judgment. I'm going to use the Hebrew, Kebnei Maron. What does that mean? They go in front of God in judgment like B'nai Maron. What is that? So on the spot, the Talmud gives three different definitions. The first definition is, like sheep. When we're counting sheep in order to give a tithe back to God, we line the sheep up, they go through a special counter, one sheep at a time. That's called B'nai Maron, that they walk through one at a time. The Talmud goes on and says, there's another possible explanation, which is, there's a narrow cliff called B'nai Maron, the Maron Heights. And this narrow cliff is very, very skinny. And when you want to walk across this narrow cliff, if you're not going to fall off one side or the other, you can't walk next to another person. Too tight, too difficult. When you walk on the B'nai Maron, you walk single file, one at a time. And the final definition that the Talmud gives for B'nai Maron is, B'nai Maron means the children of the master, of the great one, of King David. For when King David's army went out to battle, they marched in single file, one at a time. According to all three definitions, the judgment on Rosh Hashanah is on each and every individual. On Rosh Hashanah, I stand completely alone. I can't say, Mom, Dad, come, tell God. There's no mom, dad there. Well, Rebbe, tell him I'm a good guy. There's no Rebbe there. Well, let my friends. No, there are no friends there. It's just me and you. One at a time. And no one else in the world has any impact on my judgment whatsoever. We're all judged as individuals. And what's so odd about this is, the Gemara then continues and says, and even though we're all judged as individuals, we are judged, quote, again in the Hebrew, baskira achat. In one glance, skira achat. God judges the entire Jewish community. I'm not judged as one. I'm judged as a member of the community. How's my community doing? Look at my parents, my friends, gather them all around. I'll bury myself in them. Everything will be fine. This year I'll pray at a synagogue where everyone is very righteous. I won't even get noticed. Yeah! What is it? Is it that I get judged as an individual, or I get judged as a member of a community? Baskira achas. So to answer these two questions, we'll start with another passage in the Rambam. A very interesting passage in the Rambam which suggests the following. A human being gets judged multiple times during their lifetime. There's a judgment that takes place once a year, every year, on the event which is coming up in a couple of weeks, on Rosh Hashanah. There's another judgment. At the moment, when I take my last breath and I wake up on the other side, there's a courtroom. And at that point, God calls the court into session and he makes a judgment. The Rambam says, Maimonides says, in the Laws of Repentance, chapter 3, halacha, law number 3, the judgment that takes place on Rosh Hashanah uses the exact same criteria as the judgment that takes place at the end of my life. Which means, if I want to know how they're going to judge me in a couple of weeks, if in a couple of weeks I want to get wealth and health and time and peace and family and children, and I want everything to be good in my life, all I've got to know is, well, what's that final judgment like? Because whatever the final judgment's like, that is what the judgment is in 2 weeks. What do they judge me on at the end? So I spent some time trying to figure that out. And here's what I discovered. First, there's a fascinating passage, it's written 100 years ago, by Reb Simcha Zissel Ziv of Kelemen, the famous head of the European yeshiva in Kelemen. He writes as follows. He says, it's well known that we say, Imru lefanai malchios. Say before me verses on Rosh Hashanah that have something to do with the kingdom of God. Why? Shitam lichuni aleichem, because when you do that, when you say in front of me verses that have to do with God, you crown me as king over you. So he says, if you think about what it means to have a kingdom, we want to crown God as king over us. What does it mean to have a kingdom? How do we make him king on Rosh Hashanah? He says, the stability of the kingdom is dependent on how much the subjects in that kingdom hold together and are unified. He said, if God forbid, this group is fighting with that group, and this individual is fighting with that individual, that suggests there is no ultimate power. Do you remember years ago, there was an argument that broke out in this city between the mayor of Los Angeles and the police chief of Los Angeles. And the question was, who really ran the city? The mayor said, I'm the mayor. And the police chief said, don't let it go to your head. We're the ones who run the city. And the mayor said, I'm sorry, but you're just the police chief. And the police chief said back, I'm sorry, but I'll show you that we're correct. And the police went on strike in Los Angeles for 3 days. And during those 3 days, they burned down 1/3 of East Los Angeles. They stopped at the borders of Beverly Hills because there were snipers on the roof. When the government goes away, the people kill each other. And more, when the people are killing each other, that's an indication the government does not exist. He says, as long as the Jews hold together, and he quotes the verse, in Deuteronomy it says, V'hi b'Yeshurin melech, when amongst the Jews there's a king, when does that happen? B'hit asef roshei am, when the leaders of this nation gather together, when they're on the same page. At that point, there's a melech in Yisrael, there's a king amongst the Jews. So how do we show there's a king? When our leaders are on the same page, when they agree, when they get together. Who are our leaders? A verse in Deuteronomy is speaking just to the heads of synagogues. The verse in Deuteronomy was written just to talk about the heads of rabbinical courts. This verse in Deuteronomy has nothing to do with you or me. Who are these leaders that are supposed to get together? And why are they called leaders? If it's ordinary citizens like you and me, then why do we call them leaders? What are they leaders of? We'll get back to that shortly. A verse that we read on Rosh Hashanah reads as follows. Nedivei amim ne'esafu. The generous patrons of the community gathered together. Nedivei amim, I should say, the generous leaders of the communities, plural, gathered together. And then the verse says, Am Elokei Avraham, the one community that serves the God of Abraham. They start out as Nedivei Amim, generous donors, patrons of many communities, but somehow they're transformed into Am Elokei Avraham, the one nation that serves God. How do we become one? How exactly does that happen? So the answer to these little questions is, you and I are leaders. Every single one of us is a leader. Some of us haven't taken our post yet, but we're all leaders. We are all leaders of a kingdom called my family. And every person in this room is either now a husband or a wife, or you're about to be a husband or a wife. You are the president-elect, so to speak. Every person here is going to at some point be leading a nation, leading a Jewish family. Those are the leaders of our people. When those leaders, the husband and the wife, when they get together, that shows that God is king. Then in fact there is one God who rules the whole world. And the proof is that the husband and the wife both submit themselves to the rules of the one God. There's a key here. There's a free ticket to being successful on Rosh Hashanah. There's a free ticket for taking control of your destiny. There's a free ticket for getting essentially whatever you need from God. And it has to do with your spouse, whether you've met them or you haven't. I'll try to explain further. Once upon a time, there was a great Kabbalist who walked planet Earth. His name was the Ari. The Ari had great teachings. And the Ari gave these teachings over to his number one student, Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital records the following. In the name of his Rebbe, the Ari, this great Kabbalist, Reb Chaim Vital, writes that the ultimate judgment at the end of 120 years, when you pass into the next world, is how were you in terms of doing chesed? We'll have to figure out exactly what that means for your spouse. How were you doing chesed for your spouse? Reb Chaim Vital says that one question constitutes 99.99% of your eternity. And according to the Rambam, who says, according to Maimonides, who taught us that the judgment at the end of our life is the same as the judgment on Rosh Hashanah, it's the same criterion, then the chesed that I do for my spouse constitutes 99.99% of whatever's going to happen in 2 weeks. That's what my attorney told me on the phone. He said, one of the two things you got to clean up is that relationship with the spouse, or if I'm not married yet, preparing myself to be the right kind of spouse in the marriage. That's something that I can do. I can change myself. I can behave in a certain way that I will be the ideal spouse. And what does it mean to do chesed? My teacher, many years ago, Rabbi Volba, said, when a poor person comes to you and says, please, I could use some help. Could you perhaps give me a gift? And you reach into your pocket and you take your hard-earned money and you take that and you place it gingerly into that person's hand. He said that is not chesed. He said, that's derech eretz, that's manners. What kind of an uncivilized boor do you think I am that if a person came and begged me, I'm hungry, can I have some bread? I would say no. That's not called chesed. He said it's called chesed when you get out of yourself. When I'm living in the other person's body, when I'm feeling what they're feeling, when I can see on their face, you need a smile. You need a wink. You need a joke and a word of encouragement. When I'm so not inside of myself that I can feel every bit of happiness or difficulty that my friend is having, that's called chesed. When I break down the mirrors that surround me so suddenly I can see who's actually standing in front of me, that's called chesed. Have you ever had this experience? You're sitting at a meal, you're all eating, and they're serving kosher chicken. Now, if you ever tasted kosher chicken, you know that for some reason they pack the thing with salt. So after a few bites of the kosher chicken, I'm actually quite thirsty, so I reach over to take my cup to drink, and I notice, oh, no, my cup is empty. I've already been drinking quite a lot. And then it occurs to me, wait, if my cup is empty and I'm thirsty, then and I look, your cup is empty as well. And I pick up the pitcher, I go over it, and I pour you some water. So, if it's chesed, it's borderline. Because the only need that I could see in you was a need that I already had. I'm still not outside of myself. How long did it take before you figured out, even though you don't wear contact lenses, how long did it take before you figured out that you should stock your guest room with contact lens solution? That's called chesed. I don't even wear contact lenses. But since I'm so out of myself that I can see that somebody else has that need, that's called chesed. And the entire judgment on a human being, 99.99% of my eternity and my Rosh Hashanah is going to be what kind of chesed I do with my spouse. That means the key muscle that I've got to flex over the next couple of weeks and the commitment that I've got to make is I'm going to start training myself to get out of myself, to see needs in other people that I've never had. When you're dealing with somebody of the opposite sex, that's very easy. Meaning, they've got lots of needs that I've never had. I was going for a run with my son a few days ago. He's young, he's not ready to get married yet, but whatever, he noticed that there's another sex on the planet, and so he started asking me questions. And he said, Abba, I want to get married, but I don't want to get married to a woman who talks too much like all the women that I've met. I said, perhaps they don't talk too much. He looked at me like I was crazy. What do you mean? Of course they talk too much. You've never met a woman? So I had to explain to him, let me introduce you to someone that you can't imagine could actually exist. And I described somebody who lives in a sphere called love space. And this creature is very sensitive. Because she lives in love space, she's extremely sensitive to any move into a relationship or any move out of a relationship. And even as she's engaged with somebody, when she can sense if the closeness increases by a micron, she feels that increase in closeness. And if the closeness decreases by a micron, she's sensitive to that as well. And because of this, since she had this sensitivity from the time she was a little girl, she started to notice that there are certain moves that she can make that will increase closeness. And what she noticed was that the more that you give, the more that you love. And she feels more affection for somebody after she's given to them. And the more precious the thing is that she gives to them, the more love she feels for them. And the most precious thing she has to give is herself. So when she opens up and she shares what's happening inside of her, she feels more affection for the person that she's speaking to. And therefore, when she wants to draw close, she speaks to you. I'll just ask the ladies in the room. Ladies, have you ever been involved in a conversation with a woman and she told you the exact same detail in that conversation twice? Ever 3 times? Ever seen 2 women walking down the street and they're both talking simultaneously? It's not that they're not trying to communicate, it's that they notice that the more that they speak to somebody, the more that they love them. Women notice movements in relationship over microns. By the way, ladies, men also notice movement in relationship, but their movement is measured in light years. I'm getting divorced? Excuse me, what? And therefore, a man looks at a woman who's speaking and says, I don't understand. Why is she talking? What does she want from me? By the way, men also talk. Men can really open up. Who's paying the water bill? No. I'll take out the trash. Could you pass the ketchup, please? Men know how to speak. But when men speak, it's all functional. And often a man is not sensitive to what it's like in the world of a woman where talking is a way of drawing close. For a man to get out of himself and realize that that's how a woman draws close, and to see it not as something strange, but as something spectacular and beautiful, that's chesed. Reb Chaim Vital said, the chesed that you show in your relationship with your spouse, how much do you get out of yourself and see what the other is experiencing, what they need, what their needs are at this moment? And of course, the exact opposite can be true also. Women have to get out of themselves and see what it's like to be a man. I saw a spectacular video a few months ago, a beautiful video. The video was called, It's Not About the Nail. And when the video opens up, there's a couple and they're sitting on a couch and they're having a deep heart-to-heart. And she's trying to express, I have this sensation above my eyes. It's like, it's below my hairline, but it's somewhere in the front. And he's looking at his wife, who has a massive nail stuck into her forehead. And he's saying to her, sweetie, maybe you should. She says, just a minute, listen to me. And she says, sometimes it's so frustrating. I put on a sweater and I find all these tears in the sweater. I have no idea where they came from. Can you imagine how frightening that is for me? And he says, honey, maybe you should actually. She says, you're always trying to solve the problem. Why don't you listen to me? A woman has no idea how difficult it is for a man to not solve the problem. To just sit and listen and hear. It's not in our nature. And you'd have to actually crawl out of yourself and get into a man's head. A man is a problem-solving creature. And it's very frustrating for him. To get out of yourself and experience what he's experiencing while you're speaking to him is a very difficult thing. But that's called chesed. To see who he is and what he needs. To experience the world through his eyes. I've got a court case coming up in 2 weeks. Federal prosecutors are on the way right here to arrest me at this moment. And I've got to know, what do I have to do? Well, the first thing I've got to do is I've got to make sure that I'm prepping myself right now to be the best possible spouse on this planet, whether I'm married or not. And we'll talk in very concrete terms about what can be done to make sure that gets taken care of before the federal prosecutors, so to speak, arrive. There's a second item they want to prosecute for. To understand what that's all about, we'll take a look at another Gemara. This passage in the Talmud, this is Tractate Psachim, page 56a. It describes Jacob's last moments on planet Earth. He had gathered his 12 sons around him. And he knew there was only a few minutes left, and he was giving over to them the most important things that they had to know for the rest of history. And before he left the people who would be the future Jewish nation, he had to tell them one thing. They were going off into a very long exile. Mashiach is coming. You won't be out there forever. There'll be Egypt. There'll be Babylonia. There'll be Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. But you're coming back. And the sons looked at him with open eyes, waiting for the next line. And he said, I'll tell you. I'll tell you when. The Jews are going to come out of exile in the year and he lost prophecy, and it was over. And in alarm, he cried out, oh no, could it be? There's a psul b'mitasi, there's some imperfection in my bed. Is there something wrong here? For years, I read that line in the Medrash. Perhaps there's an imperfection in my bed. And I always understood, what did it mean? Perhaps one of my children is not straight. Perhaps there's something wrong with one of them. And I can't reveal this information because that child is going to be corrupt, and they'll take that information and they'll use it improperly. Perhaps there's some sort of psul b'mitasi. Maybe there's something wrong with my bed. But the Medrash doesn't say perhaps there's something wrong with one of my children. It says perhaps there's something wrong with my bed. Okay, so let's say bed means there's something wrong with one of my kids. Well, it can't really mean that because, okay, so what? Jacob was about to go to the next world. He was about to receive his portion in the next world. So one of his kids makes a bad decision, decides he's going to go, as they say, off the derech. One of his kids is going to start eating pig on Yom Kippur. Okay, fine, people have free will. And I understand why Jacob would be unhappy about that, but he should go into shock. The moment before he dies, he should go into shock as if it had something to do with where he's going to be in the next world. Why was he so concerned for himself at that moment? God forbid, perhaps there's a flaw in my bed. Unless you want to say that somehow it was obvious to him that if one of his kids was going to become corrupt down the line and do terrible things, that had something to do with him. That in some way it was a reflection of him, and for some reason, when he was talking about his own flaw, he referred to his bed. Why? So, the bed can be understood literally and figuratively. When he said, perhaps there's something wrong with my bed, he might have meant literally, perhaps the education that I gave to my kids through my bed was an improper education. And that reflects poorly on me. What kind of education do you give your kids through your bed? There is an unbelievable, a spectacular letter that was written by Ramban, Nachmanides, called the Igeres HaKodesh, the Igeret HaKodesh. In this holy letter, the Ramban speaks about a couple's intimate life. And there he says the following: the most impact that you make on your children, you make when they're young. And as they get older, the impact that a parent has becomes less and less. It takes more and more energy to actually change your kids when they're older than when they're younger. So if I have a choice of impacting my child when my child is 10 or 20, it's going to be much easier at 10. And everything that I do at age 10 has much more of an impact. And I can have much more of an impact on my child when he's 5 than when he's 10. And believe it or not, what I do even in front of a 2-year-old has more impact than what I do in front of a 5-year-old. And even more amazing, what I do in front of a 3-month-old has more impact than what I do in front of a 1-year-old. And if you just continue drawing this line backwards, you get to the single most powerful educational moment in a child's life. Who was I? What kind of a man, what kind of a father was I at the moment of conception? Nachmanides says it is the single most powerful, most influential moment in a child's life. And of course, after that, you can still have huge effects. And we put lots of energy into educating our kids. But I can educate my child with my bed. That is, if my only thought is, I want to give, and I want to love, and I want to take care of, and it's not about me, it's about her. Or speaking to a woman, it's not about you, it's about him. That has a tremendous impact on a child. Yaakov might have meant literally. Perhaps there was a psul b'mitasi. Perhaps I didn't do proper education in the first split second of that child's existence. And because of that, perhaps one of my children is going to have problems down the line. And they have free will, that's true. But I will be held responsible in a moment when I arrive in the next world for that educational mistake that I made because my character was not where it should be. I wasn't a big enough giver at that moment. Maybe Jacob meant it literally. Or alternatively, perhaps Jacob meant it symbolically. The bed is a symbol generally in the Bible of the spousal relationship, of the marriage. You see that Reuven was so upset over the way that his mother's bed was treated, because that was a reflection on, in Reuven's mind, Jacob's relationship with Reuven's mother. The bed is a symbol. Maybe what Jacob meant was, perhaps there was a psul b'mitasi, maybe there was something in my marriage that was imperfect. And so even though, my kids have free will, but he assumed if my kid goes off the derech, so to speak, if my child has problems down the line, if my child is corrupt or cruel or selfish or whatever the case is, it has something to do with my marriage. It's not like my marriage is irrelevant in the equation. Thinking about all this, I ran across an amazing Talmudic passage in Tractate Sanhedrin about a very unique case in the Torah which never ever happened. It's a case called the Ben Sorer Umoreh. And it's a very famous case. What happens is a man goes out to battle. And while he's in battle, he sees a really good-looking lady. And not Jewish, but she's... And he grabs her. And he takes this non-Jewish woman, and he brings her back to his house, and he marries her. So the Medrash says, the Sifri says, he didn't marry her for altruistic, moral, admirable reasons. He married her because she was... And it was selfish on his part. He wanted a girl who looked like one of the things on the front of a magazine. He was selfish when he started. The Sifri says because he married her selfishly, he'll continue in that path. And ultimately, because no person does everything you want at all times, he's going to end up hating her because he's a very selfish person. So he grabbed this non-Jewish lady, he married her, he ended up hating her. I imagine they fought. And they had a child, and that child became the Ben Sorer Umora. He became a criminal. He was a thief. The Torah says, we take this child and we kill this child. Kill him now while he's just a thief, because eventually he'll become a mass murderer. He's going to be the epitome of evil. Kill him now. By the way, the case never ever happened. We never had a Ben Sorer Umora, and the Torah says it will never ever happen. It's only to teach us a lesson. What's the lesson? That if a person is selfish and starts off a marriage on a selfish foot, the result is going to be the child is going to end up off the derech. By the way, I checked. There's only one place in all of Talmudic and rabbinic literature where the phrase off the derech appears. Only one place, which means that's probably the address if you want to know about off the derech. The one place that it appears is in Rashi's comment on Ben Sorer Umora. He says, this child was sar min haderech, he went off the derech. And the Talmud clearly says here it happened because of selfishness. Okay, watch. Here's the problem. This case will never happen. It'll never happen because in order to actually kill a child like this, you have to meet all sorts of criteria which the Talmud says will never be met. One of those criteria is as follows. I'm quoting now Rav Kanievsky, writing in the Orchos Yosher. He says, if that young man ever was a witness with his eyes or heard with his ears his parents fighting, you can't put him to death because his parents took away his free will. It's an astounding passage. If the child ever heard or saw his parents fighting, they took away his free will. It's not fair. You can't punish him at this point. Okay, that's what he says. That's according to the Talmud and Sanhedrin. Here's what bothered me. What are you talking about? I can't put him to death in a case where the kid heard them fighting? That is the case in the Torah where it says you should put the kid to death. He married selfishly, got a pretty lady because he was selfish, and then he ended up hating her. They ended up fighting, I assume. And he hated her, and then the kid went off the derech. So, of course he heard. So then what case does the Torah say you should put the kid to death? Here's what I realized. The case where you can put the child to death is where the child never saw and never heard his parents fighting, which means one of two things. It means either he hated her, but they never fought, or they fought, but they never did it in front of the children. The Torah is saying, in one of those two cases, either where he hated her, but he never fought, or they fought, but they never fought in front of the children, that will push a child over the edge and the kid will end up becoming a thief, and in that case you can kill the kid. If he actually saw them fight or heard them fight, you can't kill the kid. It's not fair. He had no choice. If he didn't see or he didn't hear, at least he had a choice. In that case you could kill the kid. You hear here, the Torah is saying that if the leaders of the nation, that's you, that's me, if we fight, that has an immense impact on my children. I'm fond of telling people, if you want to see my potential, if you want to see who I could be, look at me here when I'm standing up in front of all of you. Because in front of all of you, I can put on a great act, and I can show you who in theory I could be. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm putting on an act. I look very righteous. In front of you, that's the way that I look. Because you don't come home with me at night. If you want to see my potential, look at me in public. If you want to see my reality, look at my children. Because they live with me. And there's a spiritual umbilical cord that leads straight from me to every single kid. And they absorb completely every single one of my character traits. They absorb my marriage. They absorb all my spirituality. When those federal prosecutors arrive in about 10 minutes, there's only two things that are on the table. One thing is my spouse, and the other thing is my children. Now, I have children, I don't have children, I'm married, I'm not married, it doesn't make a difference because it's all about when I am in that position, what will I do? I had children, and they got problems. Doesn't make any difference. I got 2 weeks. I don't even have to pay the whole debt that I owe. All I've got to do is be able to tell those prosecutors when they walk through that door, I've already made an arrangement to settle. And I'm going to start making changes. You want to hear? I'm going to spend one night a week out with my spouse for the rest of my life. I swear. The single most powerful vaccination you can give to a marriage, talk. You're not married yet, you're going to set up a marriage? This has to be from the outset. My Rebbe used to say, if you don't spend private time with no distractions, flipping off the cell phone, nothing going on, no texting, he said 2 to 3 times a week, your marriage is headed for a crash. What I've discovered over the years is, if a couple will just set up one night a week where they will go out and spend time together, just face to face, no other distractions, their marriage will not only recover, it will flourish. Just one night a week. That's something I can sign in blood before the prosecutors arrive. There's more. It's never too late to study something as complicated as how to be married. By the way, I found it interesting. When I was in Jerusalem, my Rebbe arranged a class for a small group of us on how to be a good husband, which, by the way, is almost as complicated as how to be a good wife. We met once a week. Every week, we came together, we sat with the Rebbe. By the way, at this point, I was 27 years old and had a bunch of kids. I sat with the Rebbe, and he told us the most counterintuitive things. I mean, things that sounded crazy. And he would say, go practice this for a week and come back and tell me. And like the stuff he told me, I knew it must have been some religious thing that he was telling us to do this stuff because it made no sense. And I remember at the end of every week, my wife would say, go back, learn more. You possess the most amazing tradition. You possess an amazing tradition passed down for 3,300 years. Your great-great-grandparents gave it to your grandparents who gave it to your parents. It was passed down through generations. Your rabbis have it. The Rebbe said, a system for creating a perfect marriage. But you have to study it. It's no less complicated than Kashrus or Shabbos. We took this class every week for 3 years. Every week for 3 years. We had over 150 sessions. And it was a small group. And every time it blew my mind. And I discovered, even though I was 27 and I knew it all, you're never too old to learn about this stuff. I'll tell you, in my family, I have a tradition for working on marriage late in life. My great-great-grandfather, he was working on his marriage when he was almost 100 years old. He was still getting advice. He was following it. His name was Avraham Avinu. The angels came, "Where's your wife?" He said, "She's in the tent." They said, "Oh, she's so modest, she's in the tent." They were trying to help him, like, stoke the coals a little. Okay, you can imagine 100 need to stoke it a little bit, but okay, even at 50 or 40, you got to stoke the coals a little bit. It's never too late to work on a marriage. I have a recommendation for communities worldwide. I believe every Jewish school, and I hope that there's some people here who are representatives of Jewish schools or on boards of Jewish schools and have influence, every Jewish school on planet Earth should be giving Shalom Bayit classes to the parents at their school. Bring in the experts. There's plenty of people in this community who know about Shalom Bayit. They should be bringing people in and teaching Shalom Bayit classes. And more than that, it's not just on the school's head. There are plenty of people here in LA and New York and Chicago and Baltimore who could be giving instruction as parents. Let's go get instruction. As married people, and more than just parents and married people, I'll tell you something else. In the old days, when I was a full-time teacher at Neve Yerushalayim, I used to give a one-year course in relationships. To whom? Single girls. I went to Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and I asked this great sage of Jerusalem, can I teach relationship stuff to single girls? He said, yeah, teach them now. When they get married, they'll have no time. You're single, now's the time. You're married, now's the time. You've been married 50 years, now's definitely the time. Go and take a marriage class. Read a book. Walk into a Jewish bookstore. There are 30 books on insights about how to be married. And you don't even have to finish the book before Rosh Hashanah. Just go buy it and tell the prosecutors, I got the book, never mind, I'm fine. And of course, the same exact thing is true when it comes to raising kids. I'm still teaching child raising courses to adults, to people in their mid-teens, people who are married, people who are single. And here I want to make a special recommendation. Ladies, it would be a very good thing. You're going to be mothers, you're going to have children. It's very important for you to take courses on how to raise kids. Guys, it's even more important for you. And the reason it's even more important is because ultimately you set the standards in your house. Your wife looks to you, you're the rabbi of your own home. You're the king. She looks to you for direction. She's going to raise the kids this way or that way. If you say, that's not the way that we do it this way, and you're rooted because you studied it, you're an expert, you'll have a tremendous influence on your homes. Too often, we men abdicate responsibility and say the wives will deal with it. Too often, we actually walk into the middle of them doing a good job and stop it because we don't know what we're doing. If we're going to be the king, we've got to know what we're doing, and we've got to become experts. There are child-raising courses just for men. And you can get in and you can learn, how do you advise your wife? How do you tell her what to do to raise the kids properly? It's very important for the men, it's very important for the women. Here I'll just make a plug, only because I always get this question afterwards. You're not sure where to access the resources, so I'm telling you right now, there are child-raising experts all over LA. There are child-raising experts all across the world. The World Wide Web, the internet, gives you access to courses. I personally have on the web a 28-hour course on raising kids. miracleofchange.com. And there are, in addition to miracleofchange.com, there are literally dozens of sites that give terrific advice. Now, I know we don't have time for this, but we don't have time not to have time for this. There are so many parents who are so busy chasing the cows, they feel they don't have time to build a fence. It's a big mistake. I'll leave you with a bracha and a promise. I'll start with a promise. My promise is that you do not have to fix everything up in 2 weeks, and you can't, so forget about it. But as Reb Chaim Vital said, there is a focus. There's 2 main things that are going to count when in a couple of weeks, every single Jew on planet Earth wakes up and says, oh, it's Rosh Hashanah. I'm religious, I'm not religious, I'm observant, I'm not observant. Every Jew, the college kid camping out in India, shows up at Chabad of India on Rosh Hashanah. It's a day when we all have a sense there's going to be a reckoning. I have to face my Creator and say, who am I? And we can cut through all the smoke. There's a lot of things that are important. There's 2 things that really count. I'll make you a promise. If this year you make a commitment and you say, you know, God, I got a lot of stuff flying, I admit. My books are not so clean, so to speak. But there's 2 things I'm going to work on this year. I'm going to work on my marriage, or becoming the kind of person who could conduct a great marriage if I'm not married yet. And I'm going to work on becoming a great parent. I have kids, I don't have kids. I'm going to work on becoming a great parent. If you make those 2 commitments, then this year I'll take responsibility for the rest. Just take those 2 steps forward. And you'll be taking control, literally taking control of your own destiny. Then it's not flotsam floating on the water. You can stand in front of God and say, I got it. I heard the message loud and clear. I'll leave you with a blessing. May the Almighty Master of the universe look down on planet Earth at this moment. And may He hear what you're thinking in your heart at this moment. May God hear from your heart right now, okay, I can do that. May the Almighty Master of the universe hear you right now making a commitment saying, I'm going to do it. And it makes sense to me, and it's basic, and it's something that I should have done before, and God, I'm committed. And may it be God's will that as a result of that, He puts everything else on hold, and He inscribes you, and I'm only speaking to you now, only you and not the person sitting next to you. I'm speaking to you personally. May it be God's will that when He looks at you this year, He judges you Beskira achas. Oh, I'm so sorry, I mistranslated those words at the beginning of the class. I translated it as, may He judge everybody in one glance. I realized this year that's not what the words mean. Beskira achas. When God judges you this year, may He judge you beskira, with an analyzing, penetrating view that focuses on achas. How much have I made unification, oneness, relationship the focus of my coming year? And as a result of that, may you be inscribed and sealed for a year of health, a year of wealth, a year of time, a year of freedom, a year of peace, a year of only good news, of beautiful marriages and new healthy children. May you be sealed and inscribed for a year of beauty, of spirituality, and of all of God's physical blessings. May you walk out of here tonight with everything that you need and dream about for the coming year. May it be a good year for all of you. Good night. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, just a few announcements. Thank you very much. Many thanks to the Yachad